Pleasure to be here and to speak at this wonderful conference today. I have thoughts on some of the issues raised by the massive actions our governments have taken in response to the COVID-19. My first thoughts are about the effects of a bulging public debt. Next, the loss of meaningful work. And lastly, the long-term effects on regaining dynamism and a healthy climate. In my mind, it is questionable whether the government can continue very long to go on borrowing enough in credit markets to cover the huge deficits that they are running in order to make the desired outlays to workers and small firms that have lost their incomes. At some point, no further increase of the interest rate offered can be high enough to induce the market to continue lending. If the debt does go to an extraordinarily high level, there are grounds for concern that the public debt may be so onerous that the government is not able to take actions on other fronts, climate change for one. There's also concern over the consequences that a huge public debt would have for the economy. As an economic theorist whose first book was on the consequences of public debt, I fear such a massive rise of paper wealth. It would shrink the supply of saving and hence shrink investment too, thus stalling or even turning around any rise of wage rates and also impeding any government measures for the social good. A path-breaking paper by Franco Modigliani and recent work by Hyun-Taek Hoon and I have shown how an accumulation of public debt drives a wedge between capital and wealth, thus, in the long run at any rate, driving both real interest rates and wealth up while driving both the capital stock and wage rates down. Now, though, as Gylfi Zuega has pointed out to me, the recent purchases of securities by the Federal Reserve may serve to decrease wealth, thus offsetting the growth of wealth that the Treasury is causing. The resulting fall of interest rates can be argued to drive up consumer prices to the point where real cash balances held by the public are back down to their original levels. At that point, private wealth has been reduced by the amount of the securities they sold to the Fed. Another thought, one that I've been chewing on, is that the widespread shutdowns following the outbreak of COVID-19 in separating many employees, contractors, and freelancers from their occupations is costing them not only loss of pay, which the government may or may not replace, but also what William Julius Wilson called the anchor that steady work and decent pay provide working class people, and what I termed a sense of belonging in my 1972 book, Inflation Policy and Unemployment Theory, and my 1997 book, Rewarding Work. An article just published in the press that lockdowns disrupt life and heighten anxiety among those who rely on daily routines is another point in this connection. All of this does not imply that the government ought to disregard the health risks that would result from a total dismantling of the present shutdowns of non-essential companies and institutions, but it does weigh on the side of considering the removal of shutdowns where the health risks are comparable to the everyday risks on subways and streets. Maybe the deepest worry of mine is the thought that the hurt and damage left by the pandemic could be serious enough to delay or prevent society from dealing with the two colossal problems arising in the future. One of these imperatives is to meet the challenge of climate change, which has become so urgent as the Earth deteriorates. It's a puzzle that the economics profession has not yet made an estimate of the cost of that in the first decade or two. The other imperative is to respond to the huge loss of dynamism that has been costing society so much innovation over nearly all of the past 50 years. I think this is imperative because I fear that the nation could collapse in social strife if huge number of people go on having little or no work in which they might at times have the opportunity ever to use their imagination or the creativity that ordinary people generally have. Most low and middle income earners lacking wage gains have not had a sense of succeeding for years. Only corporate profits and salaries have gained. Most working people report far less job satisfaction than the previous generation did. We have to find our way out of this morass, in spite of crises and the current crisis of the pandemic. Some vision is going to be required. We will have to consider new ideas, yet we might learn things from looking back to times long ago. In the 19th century, more and more Americans were experiencing a new kind of life. Abraham Lincoln, back from a tour of the country in 1858, wrote that young America has a passion, a perfect rage for the new. From manufacturing to farming, many people might use their imagination and creativity in their work. For decades to come, business was about coming up with new methods and new products, and then trying them out in the market. The result was grassroots innovation. This life brought extraordinary rewards. By mid-century, American innovation generated what historian Walt Rostow dubbed a takeoff into sustained growth of wages and profits both. Britain took off before, and Germany, then France, took off after. Yet America went ahead of them all, growing dramatically for more than a century. Work in America also offered non-material rewards integral to a meaningful life. There were not just the satisfactions of learning things and solving problems, or the sense of agency from having some responsibility and exercising initiative, all present in most any enterprise. People were flourishing. There was the excitement of conceiving unimagined things, the feeling of making a difference, and the thrill of voyaging into the unknown. No wonder Americans were constantly striving and dreaming of success. What was behind this new life with its fantastic innovation? Few would dispute that an economy with competitive markets and the free entry of new firms were necessary. So is a government fairly free of politicians selling contracts in return for contributions. But those enabling factors were not sufficient to account for the new life and the resulting grassroots innovation that came to America and stayed for more than a century. In the 1900s, a theory of innovation was built by the German Historical School. Arthur Spiethoff viewed innovation as deriving from discoveries of scientists and navigators. Standing on his shoulders, the Austrian Joseph Schumpeter added that such an innovation can only occur when a business owner, an entrepreneur, spots the new opportunity. In that account, creativity had nothing to do with it. These tenets entered into the canon of economics, unfortunately. Scientific advances were thought to be behind innovation, and the economy having the best entrepreneurs gets the lion's share. But that theory does not explain the rise of grassroots innovation. Lincoln saw there having been no increase of scientific discovery in that era, let alone the rise of a new life. But that theory does not explain the rise of grassroots innovation that Lincoln saw. There having been no increase of the scientific discovery in that era, let alone the rise of the new life. This raises doubt that most or even much of innovation has come primarily from advances in science. What then did it come from? My thesis is that a widespread expression of imagination and creativity among ordinary people at work over much of the country brought the outpouring of the new products and methods that constitute innovation and a wide involvement in gratifying work, not the advances in science. Some powerful Renaissance values: to pursue one's happiness, to think for oneself, to take the initiative, to embrace uncertainty, and to make a mark. Those were the driving forces. In this view, it is a decline in America of that spirit, leading the nation into what Jimmy Carter called a malaise that, since 1970 or so, has brought generally slow innovation and a gradual decline of job satisfaction. Not any decline in the advances made by the world's scientists. And as everyone knows, the new giants of the information age, in moving to protect themselves against outside competition, are stifling as much as they can the innovations of newcomers. Now this thesis, values and decline, has been submitted to statistical test. In every advanced economy, estimates have been made of that part of each year's productivity growth attributable to homegrown innovation. As the thesis predicts, estimated innovation has been fastest in America. Though innovation in America slowed around 1970, and after a comeback slowed again in 2005, innovation in Germany, France, and Italy also slowed markedly. Moreover, the huge gap between the highest rates of innovation and the lowest rates of innovation make it difficult to view innovation as the gift to all advanced economies coming from the world's scientists. A statistical analysis of household survey data from a wide set of countries confirms that inter-country differences in attitudes for and against Renaissance values are predictors of the differences among countries in their rates of innovation and hence in their growth rates. But there is more to life than growth. A critical mass of those values in a nation can fuel the dynamism necessary to spark innovating from the grassroots on up. And long experience in innovating workplaces makes possible better lives for ordinary people, lives of imagining, creating, and venturing into the unknown, bring meaning and many rewards. Regaining these values will be hard. Some inspiring influences that may have been formative have disappeared. Fewer colleges have courses in the stirring, eye-opening tales of the humanities, the Odyssey, Cellini's autobiography, Don Quixote, Hamlet, Candide, Jane Eyre, Moby Dick, Leaves of Grass, and many more, on what makes life worth living. Fewer homes have a piano in the parlor anymore to introduce the children to expressive and imaginative works. Fewer parents convey to their children a sense of what working life in companies is like or could be like. If we go on like this, generation after generation, we'll be hard-pressed to find meaning in their lives. Generation after generation will be hard-pressed to find meaning in their working lives. It is urgent then that we regain the spirit that for more than a century made America the marvel of the world. It may be that design of a national program aimed at achieving the necessary structural reforms will not receive broad attention when we're in the midst of a viral panic. But one thing is sure, our nation will continue to pay a high price if we go on steadily failing to recognize and to address the decline of the American spirit.